We reserve after the MRL reps speak. Please hold any questions or remarks until designated time. No interrupting and an orderly discussion. Please refrain from interrupting others during the meeting. Speaking protocol, when it is time to speak, please wait until the chairperson calls on you. This will help maintain a smooth and organized flow. Thank you for your cooperation. Want to go ahead and state your name and...
Sure. So my name is Joe Roscoe. Work for the Washington Companies, formerly with MRL, and we transitioned operations to BNSF on January 1st, 2024. So I guess I'll just give a little background on, most of you probably know, Montana Rail Link acquired the 8th subdivision, what is Drummond to Phillipsburg, way back in '87 from BN. Obviously never operated on it ourselves. My research indicates the last time a train was on it was maybe 70s, early 80s, something there. We were 1987. So with our transition to BNSF, we obviously transitioned all the operating assets, right? The main line from what was Huntley, Montana to Sandpoint, Idaho, back to BNSF. So we no longer have any rail operations anywhere in the state. We retained a couple of branch lines, this being one of them. And so our intent is to, as you probably noticed, we filed publicly with the Surface Transportation Board out in DC, kind of our initial notice of abandonment. But before we formally navigate that process, I wanted to make sure to talk to the county to see if there's any interest from a county perspective, private group, whether it's a trail group, whatever group perspective, in acquiring that corridor, right, the 8th subdivision corridor. So there's a specific program called the Rails to Trails program. Some of you have probably heard of it, maybe even researched it. It's set aside by Congress in 1983, and really what it does is it allows railroads to take non-operational lines and put them in what they call a banked status. And then if a group comes along, whether it's a city, a county, a private group, doesn't matter, and they want to acquire that line for purposes of converting it to a trail, they can enter into negotiations with the railroad. If you come to an agreement, take it out of bank status, then ultimately construct a trail. And the advantage of the Trails Act program is that it does two things. Number one, it maintains the integrity of the corridor. So if there are reversionary interests, if some of the corridor was subject to a land grant initially and there's a reversionary interest to the government, if it was easement based, you don't have to deal with any of that, because basically what the trail group acquires is what the railroad had operationally. So it just maintains the integrity of the line. The other thing that it does is it preserves the line for future rail operation. Now, I'm not personally aware that any of these things have actually been put back into railroad operation, any of the corridors that have been turned into trails, but Congress's intention was it's really hard to build and acquire rail corridors, right? If you try to do it privately, that's why they did it in 1864 via land grant. And so in theory, it preserves the corridor in case, General Motors builds a manufacturing plant in Phillipsburg and they want to ship by rail. In theory, somebody could come in, a railroad operator could come in, make an offer of financial assistance, reacquire the line. They'd have to make the county whole or the trail group whole, whoever put the money in originally to build the trail. But that's in theory what you could do. Like I said, I think that's almost an impossibility with any of these things that have actually been converted to a trail, but technically the statute allows you to do that. So from an MRL perspective, we wanted to gauge, community interest, county interest, et cetera, in talking to us about potentially partnering on a trail. If there is interest in that, great. If there's not, then we'll just continue down our abandonment path and ultimately abandon the line and then just divest of it, kind of just in private property transactions. So that's kind of the background. If there's anything else you...
I think that's why we want to have a public meeting, instead of us just going ahead and making a decision. We need to hear, there's so many landowners, so many other people involved in this, and there's no Zoom today. I didn't get it set up, my bad.
Scotty, is it being recorded? Is this meeting being recorded?
She's taking notes right there, and recording. Yes. So, I guess we'll go ahead and start taking public comment, and we'll just start right here in the front. You're first. State your name and who you're with or whatever.
My name is Scott Lyons, and I am actually on the Flint Creek Trails Association board and also the president of the local town council. And I'm going to let others...
Would you stand up so
Yeah.
everybody, just make sure, sorry.
I'm not gonna speak for either, I'm going to let others speak for the mayor. Whatever he did right there, I'm gonna let others speak for both those entities. I'm just here because I'm interested, so.
Yeah.
I'm just here with Mr.
We'll
Ross.
go around and come back to you, okay? So it's just gotta work that way, and then we get everybody going, okay? You gotta stay together here. Go ahead, Jack, sorry,
I'm just here with Mr. Roscoe, so I'll pass to the next.
okay? Go
I
ahead,
do
Linda.
have comments. I'll give you guys a copy. I have a copy for
And I have some other comments right here, but we'll wait until we talk to everybody in here and then we can go through these, okay?
So, I guess as the planner for the county, I've looked through the documents, that they provided. And right now, the only call in there for abandonment is for the trail process that they're talking about. I just think it's a little early to be talking about trails if that's the only use. Sorry, I need to have a candy because I'm a little diabetic right now, so. But, so that, if that's the only use that's there, I just don't know that land-wise it makes sense. Thank you.
Oops, sorry.
And
Everybody shut their phones off, please.
Maybe that's an appropriate noise.
Is that coming off your phone, Sean?
No, it isn't.
yeah, I am.
Alright, go ahead, Linda.
So essentially, in my comments, you'll see there that the trail would, so the trail, according to them, is proposed to end 1 mile south of Drummond. So it won't actually connect up. There is gonna be a break there because they're gonna keep that piece, thank you, of the corridor. So there's that question. But then the other thing about the trail corridor is there's 10 bridges that would be required. And as we know, bridges are expensive. So there's that question. So the project right now is intended to salvage the track and ties only, and the rail bed is to be left intact. And according to their document, it says, no ballast to be removed, no soil disturbed, no digging, burying any kind will be permitted. Which of course raises the question of what's in the soil. It's just the fact that rail corridors tend to be contaminated corridors. They just do, which is why trail projects like to take them, because then they pave them and they cap them, and they're a capped contaminated corridor in place, which is an acceptable way of taking care of it. But I know they didn't do soil testing for this, and I don't know, in my opinion, soil testing probably should have been done. And then if the county acquired that trail, you then have to maintain that cap. That's part of your requirements at that point, is to maintain the cap, which means you have to keep the asphalt good. You know, you have to maintain the cap because it is an official cap at that point. So there's that question that I have regarding the soil that's actually on there. I personally feel that in 3.2, section 3.2 of the document, that where it says the property does not contain, so the corridor does not contain or go through any prime ag land. I disagree with that. It goes through a lot of our prime ag land within Granite County. I think that should have been changed in the document, or needs to be changed in the document. Honestly, a trail corridor poses a lot of problems going through ag land. You have irrigation easements and ditching that they admit crosses it. It's in their document that it's crossing it. You have access along that corridor right now, open access for livestock. So the whole thing would have to be fenced off to some degree. And it's just a questionable use to have people going through private ag land and what that really does as a disturbance to the ag land. This is quality ag land in Granite County that it's going through. It goes through a lot of it. There's several owners, and I don't know that it's a good fit for a trail. Under critical habitats, they say that there's no critical habitats. I just don't feel like there's enough information there. Trout Unlimited has spent the last 3 or 4 years doing huge projects on the Flint Creek because of fish habitat. Whether any of this would, as you all know, this corridor goes through that riparian area between here and Maxville. You can't just say that it's not going to affect the water quality and that it's not going to affect fisheries, because there just is no information given on that. It states in that document that it's not in the 100-year floodplain. That is incorrect. It is within the 100-year floodplain. There are portions of the bed that are raised that are not within the floodplain. But that roadbed dips down into the floodplain, which MRL knows because they have applied for floodplain permits to fix the MRL tract in 2022, I think they applied for a couple permits to 2021, 2022. So I don't really have a problem with them going in and saying, we're abandoning the use of this tract and we're taking our ties and our rails and leaving it and making just, that's it, that's the end of it. But to just say, to actually take that next leap and say it will go to a trail project is a big leap. And I don't think there's nearly enough information on the table to say that that's the next step. And they say that that is the only use of this corridor is for a recreational trail. There's no other use for it, other than to go back to the property owners, which I don't have a problem with as long as it gets cleaned up. And then the only other thing that was in there is that they have noted that there are easements for irrigation where people have cut across, and just to ensure that those people get an official easement before abandonment happens. So that's it.
Thank you. Okay, Ed?
Very good. I have a couple of I'm chill, I'm a happy guy. But I have a few questions. After paying leases for over 20 years, and some of these people paying leases for over 100 years.
Could you please give your name?
Ed Short.
Okay, Ed, thank you.
And paying these leases every year to keep that partial. And we've moved our fences, and they're on the other side of the track. And the cows are up on there. Our water comes from the Flint Creek irrigation and runs down through there, right by the track. In there, there's head gates that's been installed that floods down the bottom part of the fields and stuff. My question is, after us paying these leases, we should get maybe first crack at maybe purchasing that so we don't have to be going through a bunch of crap. With open range laws, you fence out, we don't fence in. We've already got our fences up. So that comes down through there, and they open up these leeways, like on Mullen Road, and the cows get up there on there because they didn't do the fencing. I mean, that's the law. And the cows get out on Montana 1 and get smucked and stuff. So who's going to build a fence? That's a lot of fence from here to Drummond. And if it's gonna, I don't care what anybody does with their property. That's your business. but I don't want it affecting where we're at, what we're doing and stuff. If you're gonna take it, then you need to fence that out. That's a lot of money to be putting posts and wire down through there. And what are you gonna do with the water? Because that's a water right from the 1870s, the Bowles water rights. And just a few things there I'd like to know. And I think you covered the rest, so that's about where I was at. But I'd like first crack at buying a little section that I got. Mine's not comparable to a lot of these ranchers, big ranchers. And maintain it, keep the fence where it is, and everything's just great. Instead of having people on the back of the field, they already got them running up and down Montana 1 like a nut, them coming down the field in the back where I can't see and harassing my cattle and whatever else they're doing down there, shooting their guns off from the track towards the property and towards the highway and towards the houses, trying to pop a deer and get it up under the fence. A lot of little things there, which will cause a big problem.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Are you gonna try to reply, or should we go through them all, and then you look it over?
Well, I mean, if people have specific questions for me, sure. I mean, if you want to do it as we go or want to wait till the end, I think it's up to.
Wait till the end. Okay, next.
Luke?
Oh, I have no comment.
I'm Dave Kessler III. This is the second. I don't own any ground here, but it's my understanding that Montana Rail Link does not own all of the ground between Phillipsburg and Drummond. That some of that rail line was leased. And when they abandon that property, that lease goes away. So you don't have, under my understanding, you don't have a contiguous trail bed to play with from Phillipsburg to Drummond. So they also, you know, our irrigation ditch crosses this. Nick can answer this better than I can, 2 or 3 or 4 times, that you're gonna have to put in culverts. And it comes out of Flint Creek to go into the culvert. So you've got DNRC permits, like to put in a bridge or change a culvert on a live stream involved. Who's gonna pay for this and what's it gonna cost? And also, if we get some nut walking through there with their dog and it runs the cow through the fence and onto the road and somebody hits it and it kills somebody's kid, who's responsible? You got a whole lot of worms crawling out of this can that you're opening that you don't have answers to. This ground needs to revert to the property owners, let them buy it if it was purchased from them, and then walk away. If you need an access to get through it to put in another line later, retain a legal easement to cross that line with a railroad track later. That's a simple solution, makes everybody happy, and it gets everybody out of all this nightmare that's been open.
So maybe I will make one comment, like, just, you know, I probably didn't explain this very well at the beginning or maybe the first meeting. MRL is not advocating one way or another, right? I'm not here to try to sell you a trail. It doesn't matter to me one way or another, right? We presented as the option only if the county was interested. I mean, if there's broad, you know, public support, you know, in favor of not doing a trail, that's perfectly fine. I mean, I don't have a dog in this hunt one way or another as far as whether you want to do a trail or don't want to do a trail. And a lot of those questions you raised, a lot of the items that she raised as well, that's all stuff that if there was interest in pursuing this, you negotiate over the course of a year. So basically what the statute says is, if you have an interested party, you enter into kind of a memorandum of understanding, negotiate for a year is the prescribed statutory period. If you come to agreement, great, on all these things, future maintenance, how do you allocate risk, all those things that go into this. If you can't come to an agreement in a year, no big deal. We go through the process you're talking about, typical abandonment, figure out what our property rights are. We haven't done the deep dive on this yet from a title perspective. Our expectation is what we're going to find is the overwhelming majority were fee simple acquisitions. That's typically what NP did around this time along with our other branch lines, but you might be right. There might be reversionary rights in there that we discover along the way, whether it's private reversionary rights or public in this case of a land grant. So just so the crowd, you know, so I don't paint a target on my back. I'm not advocating for a trail one way or another. I'm just here to provide the information on how the process would work if people are interested.
And that's why we had you come in, so we could explain what they had. So, all right. we'll move ahead.
Yeah, I'm Dave Kessler, and I've been there since 1957. The railroad goes right through the middle of us. And it would be very disruptive having people walking through. Most people like to walk with dogs, and that's great. I agree with that. But dogs and people through the middle of our cattle, and that is prime agriculture. That's our most prime piece in Granite County. And it wouldn't work good for us. It was our understanding from my dad, who purchased that property first, that was a railroad right-of-way. And I would have assumed that right-of-way would revert back to the landowner. I have no problem with leaving a corridor there if the railroad ever wanted to come back. But for us and our irrigation ditches going back and forth across, it wouldn't be good at all for us. And I appreciate the comments from you. That was very informative.
Thank you. Nick?
So I'm Nick Kessler, and I'd just add that if a trail was going to go across these properties, you're gonna isolate little pieces of farm ground that wouldn't be accessible. Property owner below us, he'd end up with just a whole lot of little wedges that he's not gonna be able to pasture or use as historical amusement. It's gonna change the historical amusement that all of us have had in our lifetime. And just add that.
Go ahead, you.
I'm here to listen.
Thanks for having the hearing. My name is Ed Brunswald. I'm a member of the Flint Creek Trail Association. We formed a nonprofit association about 10 years ago in order to organize many individual voices into an organization interested in a trail connecting the towns of the Flint Creek Valley, potentially using the old rail line. In the meantime, we've worked with Phillipsburg Rotary, DNRC, and the town of Phillipsburg to build walking trails at Phillipsburg Town Park. We applied for and were successful in receiving 2 RTP grants to build these trails. We also worked with the town of Phillipsburg and BLM to build the Miners Trail on the hill above town. We now have once in a lifetime chance for local citizens to come together and address all the opportunities and challenges of building a trail to connect our communities. A trail that offers many advantages, including providing economic stimulus for local communities, Drummond, Hall, Maxville, and Phillipsburg. Ensuring the safety of pedestrians, bicyclists, and motorists to get them off the highway. Providing healthy and safe opportunities for exercise in the great outdoors for local citizens. Right now, we're in the process of gathering information. We understand and respect the concerns of ranchers, landowners, and homeowners about the potential impacts of the trail. We look forward to developing a plan for a trail that is right for Granite County and will become the pride of our communities. You can contact us through our website, flintcreektrails.org. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
I'm Steve Emmonshoe. I wrote a little something here. Number one, everybody has different opinions. There's nothing set in stone in here. And what I'm going to read you a little history and a little synopsis, my own synopsis. And don't take it against the agricultural community or the Trails Association or any of it. Just take it to heart. Several years ago, Tiny Johnson, a true son of Phillipsburg and my high school science teacher, an advocate of mining and logging, said something that I thought completely against his and my views. We were traveling east on Broadway after unloading our daily load of posts and poles. Our usual conversation while returning from the woods was about how important logging and timber and ranching were to the economy. The sun was setting at our backs as we headed east towards those brightly illuminated mountains. It was October, and the most distant peaks were white with fresh snow. Tiny says to me, "Those are a part of our future." I said, "Yes, there is untold mineral wealth and timber in them dar hills." It shocked me when he countered by saying, "We need to turn to recreation as mining and logging are not in the foreseeable future and won't be in his lifetime and probably not mine or my children's. He countered by saying, what we want doesn't really matter, as economically the cards aren't in our favor. I refused to accept his conclusion for years. Time would prove I had a failing grade with his conclusion. Our economic stability was largely dependent on natural resource extraction. That's how this place came about and grew. We have transitioned into an economy based mostly on tourism and recreation. There are no indication we will soon return to an economy based on natural resource extraction, other than the natural resources attractive to the tourist and recreationists. I've always and have and continue to advocate for natural resource extraction as the primary economic stabilizer. But times change, and we must grasp what is handed us. So until things change, let's look at how we can enhance our economic resources of tourism and recreation. We are not alone trying to get those dollars spent by visitors to Montana. To me, it makes perfect sense to show we are the best last place. And we have to be diligent in our efforts of attracting people to spend time and money here. A rail to trail should be considered as another item on the menu of what we have to offer. Rail banking on the spur from Drummond to Phillipsburg should be considered. Rail banking is a way to preserve the railroad corridor for future use while allowing it to be used as trails in the meantime. When one looks at our history concerning economic health, you don't have to look farther than this county's wealth was from natural resources, including agriculture. Our natural resource extraction used to be the tangibles of mineral and wood. We should also prospect the non-tangible. Do what we can and add value to the great untapped natural resources, including our beauty, history, and nature. Economic successes come with calculated risk. Don't be against something without weighing all its benefits against its negativity. Don't be short-sighted and abandon without some protections for future use. And I think that's the bottom line. Once it's abandoned, it's gone. You'll never see a railroad again. And I can't foresee the future, but like I say, once it's abandoned, it's gone. So we need to figure out a solution, I think.
Thank you. Max? Charlie Park.
I'm Charlie Park from Drummond. I'm a great recreationalist as long as somebody else is doing it. I'm not interested in it. I mean, we allow hunters and, you know, anything they can do to enjoy the land is great with me because I just enjoy working on it. And I looked coming up this morning and there's not a lot of disruption where the railroad is right against the highway. But there's a lot of these, as Kessler stated, we've got 5 ditches go under, it goes through us right through the middle for about 2 miles. They said this morning they're gonna keep a mile of that, so. And it'll cause a whole bunch of problems, as they've stated. But I'm not sure they can legally do that. Now, I'm not a real estate attorney, but we've got power line easements also. And I don't think the power line, the power company, BPA or Montana Power or whoever, I guess it's not Montana. You can tell how old I am. I don't think they can turn that into a public easement. These are private easements. There's a whole lot of difference between the railroad running a train up and down the track and people and a public right of way. It would devalue the land it went through. And I don't think you can do that without compensating. You know, you'd have to condemn it or something. I'm not an attorney, but I don't think you can turn a private easement into a public right-of-way. That's one thought. the highway is wide in lots of places, the highway right of way. If they could do a combination of put it down the highway, and unfortunately, where the highway is narrow up through the canyon between here and Maxville, it doesn't parallel the highway. Well, I'm sure you could get a trail put in if you wanted one, but it's probably to Rail Link's benefit to donate it to a nonprofit and they get a tax write-off. If they sell it back to the landowners, you know, I don't know how all that works, but as has been stated, it's gonna cause a lot of problems for a lot of people. Cutting off little corners, dividing your pastures, it's gonna be quite a problem if they make this a public thing, and I think it'll be a lot of lawsuits. Because I don't think you can turn a private easement into a public right-of-way, just like that, by signing a paper. We had some land one time, the Forest Service wanted a right-of-way through it. The ACM had a right-of-way, the Forest Service paid a guy for a year to study land values with Forest Service right-of-ways and without. And you know, they probably paid him $100,000 time to travel all around. But anyway, I don't think you can legally do this. I think that's the end of the discussion right there, probably. I'd like to see a trail, you know, I like to see people riding their bicycles unless I'm lowboying a wide load over Lowell Pass or down by Salmon Lake, you know, and there. But a highway like this, there's room they could have both. So, you know, I think it's gonna be a big battle to try and make this public thing right through the middle of everybody's land. I don't think you can legally do it. An attorney could tell you that. Yeah, I'm for recreation if they wanna do it, but I don't wanna have to run around them and work around them while they're doing it.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, my name's Scott Struna. We own a chunk of ground down north of Hall. It's been in our family since 1914, I believe. The railroad tracks have run through there, you know, since we've owned it. I have one of those chunks of ground that I don't think that you guys actually have a right of way through. It's never been fenced. We've continuously grazed it, hayed it, used it for 110 years now. I would think if most places where you use something like that, you develop yourself a prescriptive easement. There's a lot of issues, like they said, with water. I have 3 approaches to cross those tracks. Is everybody in the public gonna think they can cross, you know, my ground to access their public trail just because there's an approach there? There's just a lot of questions. I'm a little perturbed with the fact that the railroad saw fit to put together a document and go talk to a trail association, but never came and spoke to the landowners whose ground that it passed through. I don't think that's really right. And then, like, it's Steve, and he talks about the tourism and that being the, you know, what runs our economy. Well, I'm not necessarily agree with that yet, but a large part of this tax base comes from these landowners here, and it's gone more to them since the timber and the mining have been shut down. We seem to be the ones that always have to deal with the consequences of these things, while everybody else just seems to deal with whatever benefits there might be to them. And as far as the economic thing, and then I'll fight this, I'll get a lawyer if we have to, and we'll fight it, and we'll see if we win or we lose or whatever. If it comes to the point where we've lost and we have to let this trail go through, to Steve's point about preserving and what we have here, when that happens, if there's a public trail through my place that bisects the middle of it, at that point, I'm not a rancher anymore. I'm a guy who owns a substantial piece of land in Durant County with highway access, power, good water, a mile of Flint Creek, and a permitted gravel pit. Now, do you think maybe a developer might be interested in that? And those are the unintended consequences that are gonna happen. People are gonna say, you know what? It's not worth it for me to try to make a living here at this anymore, but I'm gonna make what I can for myself, and I'm gonna get out. You can only push people so far, until they decide to do what's best for them. So, thank you.
Mayor?
My name's Gail Leeper, I'm the mayor of Drummond, but I'm also on the planning board. And so we got this document from the MRL company, and anybody can have a copy of it. We'll make a copy of it. I believe probably Phillipsburg may have gotten one too. Just to add to Linda's note, there are, in this document, they say there are 21 bridges in Granite County. So as we know, should that be, the county is responsible for bridges in Granite County. So.
I don't know.
Doug Gickert, we live up by the cemetery. I had some questions for Joe, if I could.
Sure.
Do you know how much taxes are paid? I think that's probably about 300 acres of skinny,
I don't know that number off the top of my head, so given that it's still what they call a jurisdictional line, so it's under the STV's jurisdiction and it's centrally assessed in Montana, it's not like a typical property tax arrangement via parcel, it's a central assessment calculation, and part of that calculation is based upon the value of the company and et cetera, but I can get that number, I don't know the number off the top of my head as far as tax revenue to Granite County.
And if the landowners want to purchase that property in the future, is that going to be by court order, or would that have to be a regular survey by a surveying company?
Yeah, so if take the trails thing out of the picture, if MRL just abandons this in normal course, then what we're left with is a non-jurisdictional line, right? So the Surface Transportation Board, which governs railroads, is then out of the picture. So then the landowner, presuming it's MRL, after we do all the title work, is then free to divest of the property. So this happened once in Montana, late 70s with the old Milwaukee, right? And you saw they abandoned that corridor. Some of it was acquired for trail purpose, some of it was sold to neighboring landowners, some of it likely reverted back if all it was an easement. So, and just to clarify, it doesn't have to be the entire corridor. Again, I'm not selling this one way or another, but I think it was to this gentleman's point, you can take portions of the corridor and make it a trail and portions of it not. That's entirely up to the party who's interested. It doesn't have to be from point of connection to the main line in Drummond all the way to Peaburg. It could be as much or as little as you want.
Yeah, and I would, I think what I've seen is from Maxville to Phillipsburg is a beautiful part of that rail line that runs along the creek. And I would think that would be my preference for some brick trail development to start with. Do you know how much easement money's collected along the way with all the roads and ditches and all that? Is there a number for, Mr. Kessler probably knows how much do you pay per cow or per acre easement?
We don't pay, we own the ground, so we're different than these other people.
They'd be paying us.
Somebody should be paying you.
Yeah, I don't. I mean, I know there are leases. I think there's probably people in this room that lease or have
somebody
leased
will-
from
somebody will-
MRL over the years, and typically those are not high dollar amounts. They're typically pretty nominal amounts, but I don't know that number off the top of my head.
And then, have you anybody calculated the acres? And I looked in the books downstairs, clerk and recorder's books, there are no lines drawn for that rail ownership in the paper copies. There's no lines for the railroad. So hopefully Washington Court knows how wide it is. Is it generally 100 feet or 60? Or
It depends. It depends on what, assuming it was NP back in the day that acquired it parcel by parcel. Sometimes they got 100 feet, sometimes it's only a 50-foot swath, so you can see it jut in and jut out along the way. See, again, that's all part of the formal title work we would do to verify that.
to get it to this banking category?
Correct, yeah.
All right.
Yeah, like this is really preliminary, just, I think everybody understands that, but no decisions have to be made today, even if there was some consensus of let's pursue a trail agreement, that doesn't bind you to anything, that just puts you in the category of then you start to try to negotiate all these things. or if there isn't any interest, that's obviously fine too.
Thank you.
My name's Ruby Kickert, and I wanted to thank you for putting this meeting together, because I've learned a lot here from these guys that I didn't know before. I am here to speak in favor of the trail, but it's kind of changed some of my views about things. And one of the things I want to say first off is the reason why people like this valley is so beautiful is because of all this open ranch land, so I certainly have appreciation for that. The last couple of years, I've been working on raising funds to build a skate park in the Phillipsburg Town Park, and which will happen in September. And we've raised over $300,000 for that. And then that's all been grant money that we've been writing grants for. And in that process, I found out things that kind of reflect what Steve had alluded to, is that that things are kind of changing as far as tourism goes, and we've seen that like with the ice skating rink that was built 10 years ago, the use from out of area people that come use that, and we've seen that with other skate parks in the community. That's not just an advantage for the locals that live there, it's also bringing in tourism, and like it or not, in our area here, we live in Phillipsburg, tourism is what the economy's based on here. And as to some of these questions, technical questions, I don't know, but you know, Butte's got that trail that goes all the way back to, well, it's eventually connecting to Anaconda and something. That's through ag land, so there are ways of doing that. These are trails is done all over the United States, and they have experience with how to address these concerns and barriers that seem to come. The only thing I would, and we do, our family goes to Great Falls just to ride that trail along the river, just because it's so nice and the kids love it. And there's not many places where kids in the county can really safely recreate on their bikes and things. You know, it's either hilly or it's all on one. So I just think this would be an advantage to the whole community. Given that though, and what I've heard here, it seems to me that this is a one-time opportunity. Once you let go of this land, you'll never have this again, and it's ideal for doing trails. But if there's time to really sit down together and look at what's going to benefit the most people and what's economically reasonable too, I think we should take that year time that you were mentioning, have some meetings and really look at this, and not just have it be a us versus them, because I know everybody wants what's right for the most of the people and the residents in the county. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Mike Carver, there's a reason we live here. There's a reason we live where we do. We like it. And it's got enough room for our horses and our dogs and for us. And I know who's on my property all the time. I don't want a bunch of damn strangers going up and down my property. That would be really upsetting.
Thank you, Mike.
My name is Cherry Carver, and we came here 35 years ago because we loved this area. We bought from Chuck and Frankie Lane, and we promised them at the time that we would never subdivide our property. We have 40 acres. We would never have the timber cut off the property. We would leave it for the wildlife, and we have done that. The train goes right by our place, or the tracks do. It would change our life forever. I think it would destroy our lives. I think we would have to leave, because you would have people on our property that, I think it would be dangerous. I think we'd lose our privacy and our security. We have bears and mountain lions, all sort of wildlife that people would have to contend with. People would get off the trail and go to the bathroom. They would leave trash. They would try to go down to the creek on our property, cross our property and get down to the creek because it's right there, and we'd have to deal with that. There's so much land here in this county that people can already recreate on. There's public lands everywhere. They can ride their bikes and they can hike. but to go right by my house and jeopardize everything we have would be terrible in my opinion. And I hope you listen to us as the landowners and not as the tourists. Thank you.
Thank you. Can't stop you. Marion? Sorry. No, you're on that roll. Marion?
No.
Robin?
Hi, I'm Robin White, and my father is one of the landowners that this would affect, along with my in-laws who have the White Ranch. So Chair and Commission, as indicated in the Montana Rural Lake Abandonment Exemption, Granite County, Montana Environmental and Historical Report dated December 5th, 2024. I'm just going to state some of the quotes that I took out of that document. I'm not going to quote each, these are all quotes. And if anyone needs to see this, I do have the page numbers attached to the quotes. Respectively, in connection with MRL's proposed 25.96 mile rail line abandonment extending from Drummond to Phillipsburg, Granite County, Montana. In 2023, the Surface Transportation Board exempted the discontinuance of service over certain rail lines that MRL had acquired by lease in 1987. Excuse me. As MRL and BNSF had mutually agreed that MRL would terminate its lease and trackage rights operations with BNS resuming service to shippers. This line proposed for abandonment from Drummond to Phillipsburg was not part of the 2023 discontinuance decision, nor was it an MRL-owned branch line stated to be maintained and operated by BNSF. Thus, the line is currently part of the non-continuous MRL-owned branch rail lines. No customers have been served on this line since MRL purchased the line from BNSF in 1987, and there are no plans for resumption of common carrier operations over the line. MRL's records indicate that there are 10 structures, all bridges, on or adjacent to this line. These 10 bridges are all 50 years old or older, primarily being built between 1950 and 1964. Except for the bridge at Railroad, I believe mile marker 14, mile post 14 being built in 1920. Bridge number 10, which has already been removed. In MRL's opinion, again to their document, these structures would not meet the criteria for listing on the National Register of Historic Places. Moreover, none of these structures are linked to events of historic significance. Following abandonment, the rail and related track material will be salvaged. Salvage will consist of removing the rail and track material from existing road bed. All salvaged steel components will either be reused or sold as scrap. Cross ties may be used in other railroad operations or recycled. Goes on. The alternative to abandonment is not to abandon the line and retain the track in place. This alternative is not satisfactory per MRL in this document. This would continue to incur opportunity and other holding costs that would need to be covered by non-existent shippers were the line to be retained. As the line in MRL-owned branch is an MRL-owned branch line, MRL intends upon the effectiveness of the exemption to terminate its rail common carrier obligation over and to abandon the line, which has been out of service in their document for 2 years. As indicated, the line appears to have been built in the late 1800s. MRL understands that many, if not all of these structures in question could remain if they use the line's right-of-way was to be converted into recreational trail per the document. My comments regarding this, from my brief research and speaking with landowners, the last operating train utilizing the rail between Drummond and Phillipsburg was sometime prior to 1980, specifically them landowners stating 1976, 1977, when the two sawmills in Phillipsburg ceased operations, thus equaling at least 45 years of non-operational line between Drummond and Phillipsburg. In my review of MRL's abandonment exemption, I concluded the purpose of the proposed creation of the recreational trail is solely to alleviate MRL of the financial burden of removing the 10 remaining bridges. In conclusion, I would put before the commission and ask MRL if it is not time to return this abandoned rail line to the landowners, many of which have historic genealogy to this valley, some of which paid no easement fee to prior BNSF or now MRL, and those of which that acquired this land in the valley after the rail line was established, who have indeed paid easement fees to BNSF, later to MRL, of the rail line that has not been active for some 40 years. In an 8-1 decision, the United States Supreme Court has reversed the 10th Circuit Court of Appeals to find that fee simple ownership of an abandoned railroad right-of-way vested in owner of the surrounding tract, not in the United States, which had claimed a reversionary interest. That was from the Ohio State University Center for Agriculture Law and Taxation, dated March 10th, 2024. You can also refer to the Montana Code Annotated 2023, Title 60 over Highways and Transportation, Chapter 11, Rail Transportation, Part 1, General Provisions, which, from my understanding, would be if you abandoned the rail link, you could turn over the ownership to a nonprofit for this trailway. Again, that didn't hold with the Supreme Court. Both of which would lead one to conclude the proposed abandonment of the rail line should be returned to the landowners. Moreover, the United States Supreme Court decision would set precedence over state. Article 6, Paragraph 2 of the United States Constitution, commonly referred to as the Supremacy Clause. Thank you. Thank you, Commissioner.
Go ahead, sir.
I'm Larry Bryan. I live at 4961 Montana Highway 1. Property owner. I'd like to thank the commissioners for this opportunity to present this petition. It's been signed by 23 different households from Drummond to Heber in response to the Montana Rail Link's proposed abandonment of the rail line from Drummond to Phillipsburg, Montana, and possibly of a pedestrian trail being created under the Rails to Trails program. We ask that you hear and take action on this petition. I say it was signed by 23 different households in regard to privacy of the Granite County property taxpayers affected by this proposed abandonment. We ask the commissioners to vote on the side of the property owners that are affected by this proposed abandonment. As property owners, as been mentioned before, have paid easement fees to Montana Rail Link for years, and the rail link has not been used. As property owners, we feel the abandoned rail link property should be returned to the Granite County property owners. We understand that the Big Sky Rail Authority is currently trying to acquire the abandoned railroad easement to build a public trail. As property owners, we feel this will be an infringement, been mentioned earlier, on our way of life. This rail link passes through numerous ranches, farmers, personal properties from Drummond to Phillipsburg. Allowing public trail through these many properties would cause many hardships to ranchers and farmers, being fencing, harassment of livestock issues, private property violations such as but not limited to vandalism, excessive litter, trespassing, possible owner trespasser conflicts, and theft. Not to mention the liability issues and the possible increased volume to our police department to enforce violations reported by property owners. We as property owners would like the commission to respect our need to keep our property free of public access, that we may enjoy our privacy. On a personal note, the little piece of property we own, our home is built on one side of this easement, our garage is on the other side of the easement. We would virtually have people walking between our two dwellings in our private property. If Big Sky Passenger Rail Authority or any entity would like to consider building a public trail, they could utilize the highway easement. By doing so, they would also be protecting the public by using the trail as being built in a high visibility area, which would offer safety to the trail users in Montana Highway 1. offers boundless opportunities for picturesque views and animal sightings without challenging of being in the middle of private land owners. We appreciate the time to present this petition, and we ask the commissioners who represent the citizens of Granite County to stand resolute with the property owners and do not allow public access to abandoned rail link. And furthermore, we ask that they help to return this abandoned property back to the legal landowners free of charge. Thank you for this opportunity. Thank you.
I don't have anything additional.
I'm Shauna White, and where our ranch lies, the railroad runs between our fence line and the highway, so we would not be as affected as many other people. However, we have always allowed public access on our land, except for where we have our, in our hay meadows typically. And we've experienced over the last several years a lot of disrespect for allowing people on our property. Big parties and trash left. One time they left a couch. We've had people come in with four-wheelers and tear up the ground. And I know that this would be technically outside our fence, but I do add my concern and to all of those who have spoken that it is a concern, and it's something that we do not want. Thank you.
Tommy?
Nothing right now.
I don't have anything.
I'm Dale Sickford, currently president of the Chamber of Commerce. The chamber is interested in seeing where this goes as far as for the discussion of trails. Am I correct that if there is an interest in trails, that is automatically by law a discussion that is entered into for a period of 1 year?
Yeah, and it can be extended too. So we, like, as the railroad, we would just have to find a counterparty that wanted to kind of sign up for that, whether it was Granite County, whether it was a private group, what have you. And then it basically gives you a year, by statute is the initial default period. You can actually extend that if you wanted to, you know, numerous times until I think the maximum is 5. And once you hit that 5-year period, if you can't come to an agreement, then you're, you know, kind of out of that trail discussion period.
That seems completely reasonable, and the idea being that everybody at that point has a chance to have concerns addressed. And again, I'm here as president of the chamber. We have not taken any position as the chamber. My impression is that most of the chamber members would like to see this investigated, but we have not particularly gone one direction or another on that.
Thank you.
Hi everyone, my name is Amanda Cooley. I'm the planning director for Powell County, and I really appreciate the opportunity to be here today. I think you guys need to show your lodge how to show up because I'm really impressed with the turnout. I really appreciate the conversation and everything that has been discussed. I think the concerns are legitimate. Linda, I thought you did a great job just kind of pointing out some of the concerns and factors around developing a trail. Some of you may know, the commissioners know, that Powell County was awarded a planning grant to do a feasibility study for a rail trail project from Butte to the Montana-Idaho border, and it includes Granite County. And so we are still understanding whether or not this funding is going to go through, just because of the federal climate right now. But we actually do have planning funding to do this kind of trail feasibility. Now we're looking at the Milwaukee rail bed, but just to give you an idea, we will be addressing exactly the things that Linda talked about, you know, trying to understand what all of the potential impacts and, you know, floodplain and environmental factors, but most importantly, public outreach. The feasibility study that we'll be conducting for the Milwaukee rail bed is really to hear these concerns and find out where people just do not want to have this through their property. You know, so as far as this particular project goes from Drummond to Phillipsburg, there is some opportunity to look at this line with respect to the feasibility study that we were awarded. Now, we need to keep our study focused
we have tourism assets, and so that's why our community, despite still, having a high value for the ranching and agriculture, that we've looked to kind of diversify and try and see if we can find a balance between recreation and trail development. And I think that there's an opportunity to do that here. I'm a planner, and so I always say that we need a plan and we need to just look at things more closely. And the conversations that I've had with the Flint Creek Trails Association, because they are our partner on this other kind of rail trail project, and so they'll be your familiar faces as we move forward and talk to the community on our Milwaukee project. But thinking about doing a planning study where we at least try and look at more information, identify the landowners that really just don't want this going through their property, and I think that there is opportunity to work through around that and work in the highway right of way. I've talked to MDT about this, and I work with MDT regularly as a planner, and they're receptive to that idea. And so I say, give it a shot, get more information, identify the folks that don't want this thing at all, because I think there's a lot to be respected there. But see if there's an opportunity for balance and maybe to work with MDT on this.
Thank you. Mark?
I have nothing to add.
I just have a question. My name is Margie Lee. I'm a resident here in Phillipsburg. Does Montana Railing have a dollar amount in mind for this?
No, we haven't even, there's a valuation methodology that you go through, right? Ultimately, if you got somebody that wanted to engage with you on a trail discussion, we haven't even we'd have to get an appraisal basically. And there are specific firms that do this kind of corridor type appraisal. And then you'd have to figure out, MRL, and if there was a counterparty, is it a sale, is it a donation, is it a combination sale donation? That's all stuff you'd have to figure out down the road.
I'm Livia Shaddis, and I'm just a community member and a resident of the county. I am impressed again with everybody showing up for the day and really appreciate everybody's input. And I just wanted to echo what Amanda said is I'm in support of the process and just looking into it and seeing how this might work, if it might work. But I think, we could all agree we're all in this for the best interest of our community and the county and Phillipsburg and Townend and everything in between. And we're all part of this community and we want what's best for it. We want, the health of the community to be maintained. We want economic sustainability. And so again, I'm just, in support of looking into this and seeing how we might mitigate for some of these issues. And if there's just places where it won't work, maybe then we do work with MDT and see if there's patches that need to go through the highway system. But I think just doing that process and not abandoning it right away, planning the process, is what I think is supportive.
Thank you. Mayor Regs?
Hello, my name is Dan Horesh. I'm the mayor of Phillipsburg. I don't have any comments today, but I also am very impressed at the turnout here. In our world, this is a big thing. This shows general interest and a great civic attitude. I'd also like to thank the county for putting this together, this presentation here today. And I would make one comment, I guess. The word of the day seems to be preliminary. So this is very preliminary. And I would advise folks to keep that in mind, and we'll see how this all moves forward. I have no specific comments to the proposal at this time. So thank you.
My name is Chuck Johnson. I think we've got a jackhammer going right there. Scott's schedule that. Timing is always important. I am an owner of Johnson Tuning Fork Ranch, and to give you some idea of the comments that I've heard today, we own approximately 4 miles, give or take, through the canyon. And I've heard Steve Ibchu, I've heard other people talking about extracting industries, timber and mining. No, and some of the people, as the Kesslers and others talked about, a major component of the lifestyle and of our environment here in Granite County is the ranching community. And I don't hear a lot of discussion about that today, but it's an important aspect as far as economics go. And it's a very important aspect to the values, I think, that us as citizens and the people who live in Phillipsburg or Drummond also share. Another thing that I would like to say is through the canyon, I think presents, and I'm talking about the canyon that starts, I don't know, is that about mile marker, anyway, between Phillipsburg and Maxville. Extremely narrow canyon through there, and I don't know to what extent MRL looked at that, but it'd be very difficult to put a trail in some spots right along the road. They'd almost have to condemn some kind of a right-of-way along the highway to do that. Where it goes through our property, approximately 4 miles, it would, in very many of those places, it would split up our pasture land there so that we would have almost unquantifiable difficulty going from one side of the trail to the other. Our cattle would not be able to go across the rail bed the way it is now. As you can see, I think the trail idea, at least through the canyon, is absolutely a terrible idea. We also own about 1 mile down your hall that's really fairly close to the highway and would not present actually the same problems. I have 2 pages of questions for MRL, and I don't know that this is the appropriate time to do it because I wanted to ask them some specific questions about what is the type of real estate interest that MRL has in this land. You know, it was originally, I think, acquired by Northern Pacific, whatever interest it is there.
Yep.
I would almost like to ask you, do you know the chain of title how that occurred? I think Montana Trail Link was established in 1987.
Correct. So yeah,
So what, at that time, they just acquired a lease, didn't they?
So for the main line, yeah, but so in fact,
Yeah, Mr. Roscoe, I appreciate it.
yeah, the person right in front of you, I think her last name was White. She was reading from our, I think our environmental and historical report. She referenced the lease.
Yes.
The lease was the main line. So the part that I referenced earlier from Huntley to Sandpoint,
Yes.
that was all leased. MRL never owned, had fee simple title to that. That's why when we reverted back to BNSF, it was a lease termination and not like an acquisition of Montana Rail Link. Yeah. The branch lines, so the 8th subdivision, which is this one, 7th subdivision, which is Whitehall to Alder, 9th subdivision, which is Missoula to Darby, and then the 11th subdivision, which is Dixon to Polson. Those were all fee simple acquisitions, quick claim acquisitions from BNSF in 1987. So we got whatever they had, and they got whatever NP had. And so, like I said earlier, we haven't done the full title research yet, and we may find that there's some fee simple, that there's some easement, that there's some land grant with reversionary, right? We may find that when we do the title work, and that becomes applicable. Put the trail thing aside. If we just abandon, right, then we're just in the world as a landowner. Whatever rights we have in that property, we have in that property. So if it's fee simple, we can sell it. If it was easement for railroad specific purposes with a reversionary right, then it would revert back to whoever the landowner that granted, NP the easement back in the day. So it might be a mixed bag of property rights.
I appreciate your answer to that because when you acquired the property by quitclaim deed, it doesn't mean you really acquired anything. If the previous owner didn't have fee simple title to it, you don't have fee simple.
I don't disagree with you.
And if Northern Pacific didn't have fee simple title to any tracks, Burlington Northern couldn't have fee simple title.
Agreed.
And when is the point where Montana Rail Link is going to consider the quality of their interest in the property so that if landowners wanted to talk to Montana Rail Link or to engage in negotiations on us acquiring the land that's contiguous to our private land, when does that occur?
So it would happen, again, putting the trail thing to the side. Let's say that doesn't go anywhere.
Let's do that.
And we're
Let's put that to the side. I think that's...
And we're just in a traditional abandonment setting. We would apply for, so the next step, the first step was the EH&R report, they call it. Next step is an actual abandonment application. The STB grants that. All that gives us is abandonment authority. It doesn't mean it's abandoned. It means then we have X number of years to then go actually abandon it. that's when we would do the title work, start to engage with adjacent landowners, start to gauge interest in, if we do have a feasible interest and there's an adjacent landowner that wants to acquire it. And obviously the adjacent owners would be our first outreach because they're the ones that makes the most sense.
You know, it's interesting you say you're the first outreach. There are people who acquired this document that is, Linda, I think, offered us copies of that. Why wasn't that document just mailed directly to the landowners along the railroad when you were doing that? Is it that it would be too costly?
You know, it's just not part of the process. So that document is a public record, right? You can go to the STB's website and pull it. There are public notification requirements that went with that EH&R report, which is posted in the Phillipsburg newspaper. And there's a prescribed regulatory process for how this works. And we just followed that process with the EH&R report.
I see. And so the notice of intent to abandon the rail service that was published in the Phillipsburg Mail, that was just kind of the first step?
Correct. Well, first step was EH&R. Then there was, the Environmental and Historical Report, not to get too acronymy on you. And then the next step is the notice. And then we would actually file the petition, which we have not done yet.
Who makes the ultimate decision as to whether or not this line would be considered for a trail? Who makes that decision? Is it Montana Rail Link or is it the Surface Transportation Board?
It's really a combination thereof. Montana Rail Link in conjunction with a counterparty, right? So let's use the Granite County as an example. The county would have to come to the table and raise their hand and say, hey, we want to enter into the Trails Act process, right? Which requires MRL and then Granite County to actually sign an agreement that says we're going to agree to explore conversion of some or all of the 8th subdivision to a trail. And then it dumps you into that statutory period, right? The initial period is 1 year, and then you can apply for extensions after that. And then you either reach an agreement on a trail, and that's including all the components that were mentioned here today, right? These gentlemen raised, well, what do you do if there's culvert costs as part of a trail construction? That's got to be figured out. What do you do if there's a soil condition discovered? That has to be addressed. All those things have to be addressed. And if you can come to agreement on all of them, inclusive of the financing portion to actually construct a trail, then you would actually finalize the trail agreement, and the county would acquire. It is a legal acquisition, and it isn't, because there's that reversionary right for rail service, but the county would then acquire whatever interest we have. So you're familiar with land transactions on the quitclaim side. That's essentially what the county would acquire. So if milepost 13 was easement only, then the county would acquire easement only, but they basically get to stand in the shoes of the railroad. And that's why Congress liked this Trails Act, because it maintained the integrity of the line from point A to point B, as opposed to having to deal with an easement challenge, a reversionary right challenge, something like that.
Okay, thank you. Did you hire an expert to physically evaluate the line to determine the condition of the line from Drummond to Phillipsburg?
As far as like for rail operational purposes?
Well, with the condition of the railroad bed, the condition of the ties, the condition of the rails. For example, you talk about a railroad bed, there are portions of this line that Flint Creek is actually eroded out, so
Yeah.
there is no railroad bedding spots. Are
Right.
you aware of that?
Yeah.
How did you become aware of it?
So we have an in-house engineer, guy that came over, not locomotive engineer, who came over from Montana Rail, and he was one of our staff engineers on the MRL side. He came over to just work for one of the other Washington companies that I work for now. He actually did a physical walking survey. Some of you may have seen him out there in an orange vest, wondering why is that guy so close to my property. That's the guy who had all the inputs as far as the structures, the age of the structures. He did the historical research on the bridges, kind of that whole physical survey component was him.
Did he write a report and send it to you as an official with
his conclusions were included in the EH&R report.
In full?
In whatever capacity was required to satisfy the EH&R report.
Would Montana Rail Link be willing to share the full content of that report that engineer provided?
It wasn't a formal report. It was more just his survey results. As far as like milepost by milepost,
Right.
There's X section of, to your point, there's X section of rail missing at a crossing. There's X section that's washed out by Flint Creek. Yes,
Would Montana Rail Link be willing, you call it a report, or what did
Yeah,
you
more,
call it?
more like a physical not survey as in like land surveyor, but just like a site survey, basically, yeah.
And I understand, would Montana Rail Link be willing to share that with the public? Because it's important to us as landowners to find out what kind of results you have obtained so far from your engineering staff, and so that, you know, we can have informed, make informed decisions on this, and also make informed discussions, you know, when we're having meetings like this.
So do you mean for purposes of analyzing the trail opportunity, or just out of general interest as far as what?
No, it's not general interest, it's what the suitability of this line, for example, to ever supply rail service in the future. I would question whether there's ever any possibility of this rail line between Drummond and Phillipsburg being rehabilitated into an operating railroad.
As we
And
sit
I
here
think-
today, I would agree with you. I mean, I think it's
Okay.
highly unlikely.
Well, then I think if that's the conclusion, that it's highly unlikely, there's no reason to have anybody come in as a kind of a placeholder, like a trail association, if it's impossible or nearly unlikely to ever have railroad service, there's no reason to even go through this process.
Well, when I say impossible, I think about it economically, right? Because I can't imagine an economic circumstance where somebody would come in and put in the amount of capital required to rehabilitate this line to run trains, unless there's some, you know, like I gave my General Motors assembly plant pie in the sky.
Can I ask a question?
Yes, sir.
So, you say the county would control it, but they would maintain, so it'd basically be turned over to be the county's problem, it wouldn't be the trail's problem, it would be the county.
It would be whoever, yeah, it would be whoever that trail agreement counterparty is, yeah.
Who you want the county to enter into, and then they have the right to have this public trail and maintain it and take care of it forever, unless we want to put the rail, there's a reason to restore rail service through that corridor.
That's exactly right.
And who controls, is that still MRL that controls that corridor then?
So, yeah, it would
So
be,
that
it would be in that
MRL?
circumstance unless MRL sold that right to somebody, right? So, I mean, fast forward, let's say a trail gets built, right? 15 years in the future, somebody discovers rare earths, right?
Well, that's what I'm getting at. So, if the county maintains it, MRL abandons the railroad, but still reserves the right to use a railroad if in some time in the future we need another railroad. That kind of sounds a lot like having your cake and eating it too. And why shouldn't the landowners that surround that railroad benefit from the possibility of discovering cobalt and deciding to build electric cars up here?
So what I just described, that's how the statute is written, right? That's how the Trails Act is written, the federal statute. That's not something that MRL is prescribing upon anybody. That's just what the statute says. Because
it is a benefit to MRL. You can't deny that.
Well, if there was a legitimate economic opportunity, absolutely. But then MRL, or whoever the railroad is, the railroad at that time, would have to come in and put in all the capital to then rehabilitate the
That's
line.
my question. The railroad at that time, who is the railroad? I mean, is it the county, and anybody who has a railroad at that time gets to come in and rebuild it? I mean,
It all depends, well,
you've abandoned, so MRL's abandoned.
no, see that, the Trails Act isn't an abandonment, remember?
Okay, well, it's just a question.
Everybody's been doing, go ahead, Chuck.
Thank you.
And I'd be happy to stick around if you want to talk to me, or any other time too, just if you want to talk to me.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
No, it's all right.
I did just a couple of points, because I probably overrun my time. I looked at Montana Rail Link's website, and there was a BNSF MRL subdivision, Montana Rail Link owned branch lines. And you're probably familiar with that sheet. I took it right off the website. This particular line between Drummond and Phillipsburg is not even marked on that, even though what was reported to do was to say what are the MRL-owned sub-branch lines. They were in dotted lines through there. This line is not even identified on that map.
So, the reason why is because we only identified the ones that had some semblance of historical service for like a customer perspective. So if you were a customer on take the 5th sub, for instance, which BNSF still serves today. We wanted customers to know, right, that this is what we own, but BNSF now serves you today versus Drummond we never operated on. So it never actually showed up on any of our subdivision maps internally because it was never an operating branch line. So like Wilsall's the same way. We own a line north out of Livingston, already abandoned. We own one south out of Bozeman, already abandoned. We own those corridors. They don't display on any map because there was never any railroad operational purpose.
One other question, and then I'll let other people talk, is that you talked about the historical operation of a railroad. Was the last historical operation on this line actually between that line that Cominco had up Douglas Creek and brought phosphate ore down to Drummond?
You know, I don't know. Probably. I mean, I think
it
the
was
person in front of you. Her dates are consistent with my dates as far as that late 70s time frame, the last time a train was on the line. I don't know what the purpose was, because MRL didn't exist until 87.
Okay.
LP shipped lumber out of here, I think, after the phosphate up Douglas.
Okay.
All right, well, thank you. If I wanted an opportunity to sit down with you and get answers, like I have a lot of questions, is there some method I should go through to?
Yeah, just hang around. I'll give you my phone number and email, and
okay,
we'll set up a time. Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you. Thank you, commissioners.
Oh, you guys have no questions, so pass it on.
No comment.
Any other comments? And if anybody,
I've got one question. We keep talking about the county, but the county doesn't even have to be involved. MRL can deal with this organization that does the trails, and the county has nothing to do with it.
They just brought it to us in case if we were interested, and this is why we set up the meeting to hear from everybody.
Okay, it doesn't have to be the county.
No.
They can deal with this
No.
outfit that does the trails, and how will the landowners be informed of what's going on
Yeah.
in that case?
It's just an informational meeting, just letting everybody know, because there's so many rumors out there of this and that. The county's doing this and not doing it. It's
Right,
just
but
letting the
if
public
they
know.
engage in a deal with this trail outfit, will the public have any information, or will one morning we get up and they're starting to build a trail?
The process is public, right?
Okay.
So I mean, yeah, the process is, and just so, I mean, again, I have no desire, MRL has no desire, Washington companies have no desire to be a divisive force in this community. This is something this is new to us. We've never abandoned a line before. This is the first one that we started down this process. You know, I get legal advice and consultant advice on things that I'm not an expert on, and one of the things was engage your local government. That's the best place to start, to see if there's any public interest in exploring a trail opportunity. If there is, great. If there's not, that's fine too. I don't have skin in the game here, and so last thing I want to be is a huge divisive force in this community.
Scott, would I be able to reopen my opportunity for some more questioning? One more question?
Go ahead.
You know, as I said, you know, we own about 4 miles through the canyon there. And it's something else I've not heard about. I wish the Department of Fish, Wildlife, and Parks was here. And there's been discussion about fish. But I don't think people really appreciate how much, as far as wildlife like moose, elk, deer, they come down to Flint Creek to drink, they cross over that. You know, we all think, as Steve was talking about, that whatever enhances the economic opportunities is beneficial, but I don't think any trail up through that canyon would be beneficial for any aspect of the wild lands and the wildlife. And I've been in a position to observe that. You have people biking and walking up through that area, you're going to greatly disrupt the flow of wildlife through there.
Any other comments?
I'd like to submit a petition that's been signed.
And we'll stamp it, put it in.
Thank you.
I'd like to make another comment if I can. Maybe for rail link to take back, that's for the trails people too, and I've heard a lot of opposing comments from people I respect, and I don't mean any disrespect by saying this, but we're talking about a trail on ground that's privately owned, that Montana Rail Link has an easement to, they might own some of it. There's no access to that trail from Black Pine Road to Sherrill Crossing. So if somebody gets on Black Pine Road or below our place, you know, say Chris lets them on his place to get onto the trail, and they have a medical emergency halfway to Sherrill Crossing, what do? You don't have the access to access the trail to get on the silly thing. They don't own the ground. They don't have the right of way through for the public. You're gonna walk between these people's house and their garage, so, you know, walking to the bathroom at night, you know, you're raising a whole lot of problems. Democracy is three wolves and a sheep arguing over what's for dinner. And we heard from a lot of property owners in here, and not one of them wants this. We're the sheep. And another thing, the quickest way I've found to get rich from watching life is to start a nonprofit. But at the end of the day, say some lady's walking down below Chris's place or through Chris's place and in those willows, and some fella jumps up and gets her, and the worst happens. Who's liable? Who gets to pay for that? Who gets to make sure that that's safe? There are not ways to maintain safety, to maintain access, and it's not even feasible to do, because if there's 10 bridges and they cost $100,000 a piece to replace, who's footing the bill for that? I don't think the Trails Association has that kind of money, and who's going to maintain it? So we're talking about something, and I understand this is all preliminary, but we're talking about something, we might as well be talking about paving the moon.
All right, Steve?
You know, this is a really healthy, good debate, and we need debate in the community, healthy debate like this. It's too bad that years ago we could not have had the same debate when there were another set of county commissioners and the highway department had a proposal to build a highway, a trail along the highway right away. And that was just tabled to the point where the debate didn't happen.
Okay, I got two letters, I got two letters to read here that are people, but go ahead, Robert.
I just wanted to add, for those that are supporting the trail, and for those who are opposing the trail, think in your own mind where you live, where each of you live. If a trail goes where you live, between your home and your garage, how would you feel? Do you want people that you do not know, that could be from any county in Montana, who could be from any state in the United States, or could be from any country in this world? Do you want that person that you do not know, where you live, wherever that might be, do you want that person walking and having the ability to be between your home and your garage, maybe when you're asleep at night? Just a thought.
Thank you.
Can I ask one more question, Scott? This will be quick. This is quick. So if you guys negotiate, you negotiate with the Trail Association, an MRL, and they get landowners on board, and they get some landowners that say, yeah, we think this is a good thing. And so then you go through your title searches, and you come to a point where you discover that, yeah, there is places where we don't have the ability to sell at, but a majority of the people have agreed, and a majority of the line is secured. Will you guys then will the Trail Association or MRL or anyone have the right to condemn those sections that they do not own to have the trail pass through there?
So the answer to that is, in that context, it doesn't matter by statute, because the Trails Act never implicates underlying, like, fee simple title ownership, for instance. So because of the congressional intent originally was to preserve the corridor, right? The trail counterparty, if it was the county or Flint Creek Trails Association or whoever, they step into the shoes of whatever rights the railroad had. Easement, fee simple, land grant reversionary, doesn't matter. So you almost think of the Trail Association as the railroad. They have whatever rights the railroad had to traverse that area.
So you guys have absolutely no reason to negotiate with the landowner. You can negotiate simply with the Trail Association.
That's the purpose of the Trails Act. Yeah, you're exactly right. When you say you guys, I feel like that's, you're looking right at me saying that's my intent. I don't have an intent. I brought this as an idea to see if there was any interest from the county or generally from the community. Now I don't have like I said, I don't have a dog in this hunt going forward. Now it's up to the, the people here if they want to do this or not. And so, but yeah, that's exactly how the process works by statute.
Okay, well, are you done? Sorry.
I'm done.
Anybody else?
I just wondered, so do we actually get to vote on this? We don't, I mean, you guys are gonna negotiate, we really don't have a say in the end?
You'll have to say, because the county is gonna be between the people and the rail link. Because they're just asked us if we wanna get involved.
Okay.
We gotta go back and see if we even wanna get involved.
Okay. I understand now.
Yeah, but they don't have to negotiate with us.
Now, I gotta read these letters. I gotta read these letters again. This is from Doug Kirker. Okay, so I don't have to read yours. That's one. And the next one's from Doug and Jeannie Swain. Are you in here?
Here.
Yes.
Okay. You wanna speak?
Nope. That was just a
You want me
comment from us.
Okay, I'm gonna read it. It says, I am writing to express my strong support for the development of a bike trail along the abandoned rail line connecting Phillipsburg to Drummond. Such a project would yield significant long-term benefit for our community, including economic growth, promotion of healthy lifestyles, and a deepened appreciation for our region's rich history and culture. Establishing this trail would attract tourists and outdoor enthusiasts, thereby boosting local businesses and creating a new economic opportunities. Additionally, it would provide a safe and accessible path for residents to engage in physical activities, enhancing public health and well-being. Importantly, this initiative offers a meaningful way to honor and respect the history and the culture of our private cattle country and the scenic lands the trail would traverse. By reversing the abandoned rail line, we can preserve the area's heritage while providing a healthy opportunities for the community. I urge you to consider the numerous advantages this bike trail would bring to Granite County and support its development. The Rails to Trails Conference has many resources to learn from, as they have built tens of thousands of miles of trails to connect communities across the county. Thank you for your attention to this matter and striving for positive growth in our area. Any comments on that? I'm not putting you in a position, was there anything else you need to say?
No, I'm just here to learn more about the process, and I'm obviously in favor of the trail.
All right, so there was somebody raising their hand.
Well, Scott, you know, one of the things, I've heard Mr. Roscoe say several times, I really don't have a dog in this fight, but they're the ones who have petitioned to abandon the railroad service, and I don't see Montana Rail Link. Have you been taking notes as to how many people and what they've had to say that oppose having a trail here? I mean, do you intend to go back to your company and say, you know, I just attended a meeting and I heard a lot of information, this is the information I heard about, you know, the feasibility and about the opposition or the people who favor it, or how do you transmit that?
That's why I'm here. I mean, that's why I'm here.
Well, I know, I
don't, like I said earlier, I don't have any intention of putting MRL or the Washington companies in a place where we're kind of a divisive force in the community. And so, absolutely, the feedback I will take back, and we have to decide how to proceed from there. Yeah, I mean, I was here to answer questions about the process, and, you know, I brought this to the county to see if there was any interest. And I've noted that there's a lot of opposition here today, and there's a lot of really good questions that people have raised as far as feasibility, everything from access to irrigation to wildlife corridors to all sorts of different things. Yeah, those are all components of this process. I mean, for better or for worse, I'm going through this for the first time, just like you guys are. I've never done this before. And so I tried to come here in good faith to be a resource and answer questions, and so I'll take the feedback.
And who in your company is going to make the decision about, you know, this, taking it forward? Is it you or somebody else?
I mean, it's not me individually, no. I mean, I answer to people just like probably most people in this room do.
And you're gonna give them your feedback.
Absolutely.
Okay,
Sure.
that's why we had him come in, just so he could give back information. We're not trying to put him in a position that he's gotta, I just want everybody to understand what was going on.
And maybe it's, I don't see any notes being taken, and I don't know that there's any record that he's going to see. I would like to see that perpetuated, the record of the proceeding today.
Okay, thanks. Robin?
Mr. Roscoe, I have one more question. Who will assume the liability if a trail is created on private land?
It would be the Trails Act party. So if it was a Flint Creek Trails Association or Granite County or whoever.
Do you know in respect to if they were to place a trail, how are they gonna maintain the trail that the citizens that utilize that do not go off of the trail?
I mean, those are.
How has that been done in the past?
So many I have limited exposure to this. I live outside Missoula. I work in Missoula, right? There's trails all around Missoula.
And are they not open?
Well, parts are, parts aren't. But frankly, the parts that aren't open, that are fenced, it's not much of a barrier.
Exactly, my point exactly. So in question to the trail and the future possibility of crime against the private citizens, that's also something to consider, besides the recreational aspect of it, the complicated process of liability and crime.
No, there's no doubt. I mean, I think you find a lot of people in Missoula that think some of those trail corridors
Horrible.
have facilitated a lot of trespass problems. I can tell you the 9th subdivision that we own from Missoula to Darby has become a very popular spot for homeless encampments. We've, on 3 separate occasions, just in 2025, we're only in March, we've paid to clean up large homeless encampments along the right-of-way. So yeah, I mean, these are all, I think, in a feasibility study would flesh out some of these, but yeah, I think these are all important considerations.
So those in the room that are advocating for this trail that may not have the dog in the fight because they don't have a property it's breaching, would you please consider what Missoula is going through as well as West Yellowstone? Look at those. I had the opportunity to visit West Yellowstone in October. I can tell you, those citizens cannot wait until the snow is deep and visitors leave.
Thank you. Steve?
Because this is uncharted territory for the communities in the county at large, I'm gonna speak solely on behalf of the Trails Association right now. And that is, the Trails Association came here looking for information, so we can weigh the possibilities. And we're garnering quite a bit of information, and then we're garnering quite a bit of vagueness too. So let's keep the discussion going and see what comes out. We're a community.
Okay.
And,
A short one.
One more quick one. If the county backs out of this deal, says we're not interested, is it die? Or can the Trails Association negotiate with Montana Rail Link and we're stuck with it?
So, in theory, yes, but remember, there's gotta be an economically viable
That was 2 questions, I'm sorry.
counterparty too.
Which yes?
What's that?
Yes to which question? That was 2 parts. I asked it.
So,
for you.
in theory, yeah, if the county backs out and another party stepped up, then is the railroad, you could negotiate with that party. But it's gotta be an economically viable party, right? Because otherwise, there's no point entering into the process, so.
What's the limits of that, or what defines?
Well, I
economically
mean, what's the cost of building the trail? I don't know. Is it $10 million? Is it $20 million? At some point, whoever wants to be the trail's counterparty and construct and maintain and be responsible for the trail, they gotta come up with funds.
Thank you.
Okay, Ed?
I'm just scratching my neck, I'm hungry.
This isn't, Rail Link isn't gonna enter into a negotiation with some national
No.
trails.
No.
So this will be local.
If it's anything.
Okay, I've got confidence in the local. But
If it's anything, it will be local.
The nonprofit national organization, we're all up the creek. But, if it's local, people understand the whole process.
Yeah.
The process the banking process just stops you from negotiating with Elon Musk or one of the stockbroker with a few $1 million, right? The banking process to hold the property in perfect.
Does Elon Musk want to build a trail?
Is that right?
Well, the rail banking process is an alternative to abandonment. That's the way to look at it. It preserves the corridor for future rail operations, for future trail operations, any one of those possibilities. And if you go look, there's a national rail banking inventory you can go look at. There's been corridors that have been sitting in a banked status for years and years and years because no counterparty has come forward and said, hey, we have the finances, number one, to be able to build a trail. We want the responsibility. We want the ongoing maintenance obligation. We have community support. So they just sit out there in this bank status. What the bank status allows the railroad to do is avoid the common carrier obligations that associate with it being a jurisdictional line, right? So it gets you out of some of the regulatory framework that you're otherwise in as a railroad. And that's why, because we don't have operations anymore as Montana Rail Link, we need to do something with these lines, whether it's put them in a bank status and wait for a party to come forward, or abandon them altogether and look to adjacent landowners, reversionary rights, kind of navigate just the more customary title process.
Okay,
Can I just add one thing? Sorry. So just as a reminder to the county that we don't have a lot of, we don't have any zoning or anything like that for this area. But we do have a growth policy, and our growth policy's primary concern is agriculture. It's stated in there, the retention of agriculture land, the retention of agricultural uses. So I think as the county, hopefully, I'm assuming some of these comments will go to this group that the environmental assessment was sent to for a decision, but we do have a growth policy. It does say for the retention of agricultural land. There's a lot of talk about maintaining the corridor. When we look at maintaining the corridor for the planning board, we're usually talking the corridor of ag land going down the valley from Drummond to Phillipsburg and then up to Skalkaho. That is why people move here. And I mean, nobody has driven past that beautiful little section of land between Maxville and Phillipsburg and thought at some point, oh, that'd be a great place to go fish, or I'd love to walk in it. It's a beautiful little piece of land, but it doesn't necessarily mean it's a good place for public to be walking. Sometimes you just have to let the stewards of the land take care of the land, keep your agricultural uses, which we have identified as a county as our main goal, to maintain our agriculture. When we do our subdivisions, we try to shove them off the agriculture. We've tried hard to keep our agriculture, and I think that really, for the county, needs to be one of our guiding posts still.
one short one, and we're, because I will be all day.
Okay, so, Mr. Roscoe, it's clear that MRL wants to abandon this property because basically you're losing funds keeping it operational, which isn't operational.
No, I wouldn't say that. We just don't have active rail operations anymore.
So it's not beneficial for you to keep it?
Yeah, it's not incredibly expensive to maintain, it's just we don't have rail operations.
If a nonprofit or a county can work with MRL to gain ownership for that abandoned parcel lien, can a group of citizens gain access to get their property back the same way?
So we got to remember, like, there's the trails process, right, which is different and unique. What you're talking about, absolutely. If throw the trails thing to the side, if we just abandon it, then we're in the scenario where we validate property rights, right, our property rights, whether it's fee simple, easement, whatever, and then at that point we divest it.
So as I just heard, excuse me, is it Linda? Is it Linda Block, the planning? So she just stated that as Granite County, their prime interest is to preserve ag land. So doing a trail from Drummond to Phillipsburg does exactly the opposite of what Granite County stands for in preserving ag land. Is that not correct?
Well, it has a couple of effects, because you do set a corridor going through that ag land, There's a real question for me as to whether that chops up dividable land that can be sold. That's a big question. We could end up with a whole lot of little pieces that could develop out as houses along the corridor, which destroys the look of that ag land. We don't want to end up looking like Ravalli County, where everything along the corridor is just house, 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 house. The goal has always been to maintain the look and feel of those big open spaces, which people associate with Montana, and people love Granite County for that.
One clarification on that is the county's growth policy is only gonna apply if the county gets involved. The
Right.
county has not said we're getting involved, so to say we're backing out, I wouldn't say it that way. We're not in already, so. Yeah, thank God.
Well, I wanna make a big thank you, and thank you for coming over, and thank everybody in here, and we'll be here
I see your dedication.
You know where Hellville is?